To go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would you please take roll?
Ms. Atkins.
Here.
Mr. Hendricks.
Here.
Mr. Houseman.
Here.
Mrs. McDaniel.
Here.
Mr. Stoffer. Mr. Rylage.
Here.
Mrs. Shepherd.
Here. Can I get a motion to approve the October 19th, 2020 agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote please.
Ms. Atkins. Yes. Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mr. Houston.
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Rylage.
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd.
Yes. Commendation and good news.
Dave, anything tonight?
I do have a few things. Received a mission moment. Jackie Bodie-Sankey, one of the counselors at the high school, has occasionally will send something out about graduates and the successes they've been having. And this was one. Simpson College won a national collegiate debate contest, and one of our kiddos, Jonathan Cox, participated in that. So I thought I would share that. And then also our swim coach, Bruce Schaumburg. Now Bruce has been here a long time, as most of you know. And he is being recognized by the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union with the Golden Plaque Award for outstanding coaching in sports swimming this year at the state girls swimming.
That is good news. Anyone else? Okay. Comments and suggestions from the audience. This is the portion of our agenda that anyone from our audience can address the board. And since we do have online access, is there anyone that has made a comment?
Nope.
All right. We'll go on to consent agenda. I do have a question about the personnel before I call about the vote, a motion. Is this an updated personnel sheet?
This one is, there are no changes.
Okay. And then I had a question, is there a typo or is that supposed to be one person who's requesting 2 jobs?
So the assistant position is a 2/3 contract, and the middle school position is a head boys basketball coach, so no, it's not a typo.
Okay.
He's dual basketball at the high school and middle school.
So he's the head basketball coach at the middle school, and he's also an assistant coach at the high school. That doesn't present itself to where things,
Do their seasons overlap?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just another example of how difficult it is to find people for these positions, so they're, and this isn't the first time this has been done, I think there's been other examples. of this.
So last year he was a half high school boys assistant coach and the assistant middle school coach.
so I guess my question is there going to be, what, so if he's the head middle school basketball coach, will he be away from the high school program for a time? Do their schedule, their train, does their practices overlap?
Honestly, Travis, I would have to ask those specific questions. I trust Jim Dermody that he's, doing what he can, not shortchange. I don't think he would put something in place that would, shortchange one program over the other. So my assumption is that it's something that can work, or he wouldn't be proposing it. But I don't know the specific answers to the question, but I can definitely get them for you.
Okay, and I guess, I don't know if it's shortchanged because I'm sure as a head middle school coach, that would probably come first. But I also don't want to cause any, I guess, rifts or anything, because if the person ahead is also a high school assistant boys basketball coach, to me, those would be equal positions. And And you said last year he was a half-time?
Yeah, so last year we had 2 assistant coaches that were sharing 1 contract. This year we have 3 coaches sharing 2 positions.
Okay, but
So
for
the pay
us,
is
with
split?
us,
Yes.
and who's splitting?
We have 3 assistant boys, high school boys coaches that are splitting the 2 contracts.
Gotcha.
So in essence, I think, Doreen, what you're concerned about, if I'm hearing you right, is that somebody may be getting more pay as an assistant, or equal pay as an assistant, while also being paid to be in the high school and maybe being there less amount of time.
Correct,
That-
right.
But I don't think that's the case based upon how they're divided up. Is that correct, Andrea?
So, yeah, the issue is gonna be, from the first perspective, would just be at the middle school boys position will only run for November and December. And then the rest of the time, they would not be having any middle school basketball. So the issue, I guess, would be the November, December timeframe for the high school position. So I don't know if they have that worked out where in November, December, the other 2 coaches are stepping in a little bit more and then a little
Gotcha.
less after the fact or not. Jim has said that it is a doable situation.
Okay.
But obviously not the best situation, but we also do not have any other applicants for.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood, since we're voting on this, how that was going to work out. But if they're aware of it and they've made sure we're not going to micromanage and say different, so. Are there any other questions on this? All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion on anything else? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yeah.
Mrs. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd.
Yes. Reports.
All right, we'll start with kind of a running report. I don't have a whole lot of additional information, to discuss regarding return to learn. I do want to just mention that, again, I'm always wanting to knock on wood, but as we're watching the 2-week county positivity rate increase, 13.7 today. I'm kind of losing track each day. It actually runs in real time. I didn't know that until just a few weeks ago. I thought it was just a daily number, but as I started watching over the course of the day, it will fluctuate during the day. So I think that they are keeping real time on those 2-week numbers to the hour at least, maybe, or at least a couple times during the day. So that continues to go up. We don't really know, what that's attributed to, other than I've also heard the local hospital administration say that the hospitals right now are actually more stressed than they have been throughout the COVID here in Council Bluffs, throughout the COVID ordeal. Having said that, we're actually experiencing some of the lowest numbers that we've had in the way of positivity rates inside of our buildings. Had a long conversation with public health, and they really feel that we are doing things to the best of our ability, and they attribute that to our efforts. Most importantly, they attribute it to the fact that we have a face covering mandate. And we know that's not perfect. We know there are some kids that physically can't wear a face covering, very, very, very few. And they're usually in more contained environments. They're usually not walking in the general population. All our staff utilize them. But at the end of last week, we actually had a few of our schools had 0 students that were positive for COVID. And that is carried into this week. We really don't, we have a few, we're always having a few suspected that are being tested and waiting for those results, but we keep getting a lot of results that come back negative. Other sicknesses. There's that time of year where colds and that's only going to get worse. We know that, so it's going to get more challenging. But here we are. Andrea and I were just meeting and discussing this today. 9 weeks in, beginning our 9th week, and probably for about 3 Mondays in a row now, we've had really calm Mondays. I always feel like I got to do the knock on wood, the proverbial. So that's good news. We have to realize that of course has the ability to change, and the experts tell us it probably will change as things get more challenging. If you read any of the headlines, they're really predicting that as the numbers are surging across the country, that they're expecting those numbers to possibly rise drastically as we approach the holidays and get further into cold and flu season. So we'll continue to take it a day at a time. We'll celebrate every day as a victory of being in session. As I've often said, here we are starting week 9 when we weren't sure we would make it through the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So we're marching toward a trimester. And also, as we were talking a little bit earlier, the principals all notified parents that as far as a continuation, we fully expect, I think I'm being a little bit repetitive, I've said this in the past, but we fully expect that the number of remote learners will decrease by a pretty significant amount at the next trimester. Now, that's barring something monumental happening, where there becomes a big concern about spread within our schools. Keep in mind that we have not had any contact tracing that has suggested any positive case of COVID originated in our schools. So all the contact tracing usually takes the positive cases to a positive exposure outside of school, not in the school. Of course, we have no way to tell if there's ever something possibly like an asymptomatic situation, but we have no confirmed spread within the building. So if that were to change, maybe those numbers would go differently than we expect, but parents are to notify by the end of the first week of November if they choose to continue in remote or choose to come back into the in-person on-campus setting. There are trying hard, unless it's a medical reason in the family or with the child, to not move the other direction. In other words, we're trying not to just keep the door open for anybody who says, I think I'll try the second trimester. We really need a medical reason if you're not already in remote. We really are preferring a medical reason to switch from in-person to remote. So, and we're not getting a lot of those questions. So there's just maybe been a few inquiries about that. And in all honesty, I think in most of the inquiries that we've received, it is because of a medical situation. So people who are already in remote have the right to continue. They just have to notify accordingly. The other thing that I wanted to share, Josh just recently completed a survey about our conferences that we completed this year. And you know, of course, this was relative to Return to Learn and relative to COVID, because all of them, for the most part, were done via online. I think there were some probably carried out on the phone, and probably a few exceptions that maybe were in person. But the survey really talked about the remote concept. So I asked Josh just to speak to a couple of high points.
Yeah, so if you recall, the last meeting that we had was the week of conferences. Jen had already wrapped hers up by the time we started here, but We sent out a survey on October 9th and left it open for a week for parents to respond. We had over 400 responses of just about how it went. We have used the online pick a time conference scheduler at the elementary for probably the last 3 years, but this is the first time we've used it K-12. Most of them said that went fabulous, easy to use, easy to find the information. This obviously was also the first year that we had it synced with Zoom. So at the elementary, that link was all automatically created. So during conferences, teachers had to go into Zoom and click on the link for each parent. Because of the shorter nature of secondary conferences, it was a single link that teachers manage and then use the waiting rooms to let parents in. Overall, parents, a lot of them commented just on the efficiency of both the time in the conferences, and especially the secondary level. Those of you that have secondary kids, you know how long that takes to wait in line, to be at the school. Multiple people commented on, I didn't find a parking spot this year at the middle school. It was great. So there is a lot of that, appreciating that they didn't have to take up the whole night to be at conferences. So a couple of comments from the elementary. A lot of them said that virtual conferences went well, but they do miss being in the building. Especially those that maybe it's their oldest that's in elementary. And there really is overwhelming support for virtual to at least be an option when we allow people back in. So we may figure out how that can work. At the middle school level, 70% of parents said they would prefer virtual, and 8% more said they would at least like it as an option. At the high school level, 81% said they prefer virtual, and 4% said they would either like to have either one or at least have an option. So, I think we've talked a lot about what innovation can come from having to be in this situation, and this is definitely one that buildings can look to and see if there's a role for this moving forward. So.
Two other things I'll mention. Thanks, Josh. One is relative to some of the things I was saying earlier about how we're trending and such. Attendance, really no significant difference in our attendance, but it is trending slightly in the right direction, so it's slightly getting better as we go forward over time. If you look at the last 30 days, they've provided that information from earlier today. Nothing monumentally significant when you see that, but it is tending to trend in the right direction. So again, that's another positive, as maybe positive is the wrong word to use, but another high point as we're dealing with the county's positivity rate increasing. And then finally, I've continued with making my personal visits to classrooms throughout the district, and I made a comment to a principal the other day that, and I don't really think that I can eloquently say what I feel in my mind and my heart when I'm going into classrooms, but it's just remarkable to me how school looks like school. It really does. It's not like I go in a classroom and I sit there and say, oh, well, that wasn't so great. If only we weren't dealing with COVID. I mean, usually it's more like I'm in a classroom and I'm with a principal, when we come out, we're talking about, it's like, other than what your eyes can see, kids are wearing face coverings, it feels like school. And again, I've been thinking about how I was going to say this. I knew I couldn't eloquently do it to really give you the feeling that I'm trying to portray, but it really is something special when you can go around a district in the middle of what we're dealing with, in the middle of a world pandemic, and all the concerns along with it, and school looks and feels pretty normal, minus or in addition to certain things like face coverings, or when you go to an activity and the attendance is lower because we're limiting things. But I think by and large, the news is good considering any of us had a crystal ball in the summer, we would have slept a lot easier if we could have had some little snapshot of, 8-9 weeks in, knowing that it wasn't a catastrophe. It hasn't been. So, but I do attribute, I don't mean to downplay, I attribute that to the approach we've taken, to the plan that this board approved, to the board's insistence on requiring face coverings and many other protocols, and our quarantining. People forget, some people think, oh, it's such a pain when you got to put these kids out. Well, the face coverings have kept us from having to put out 25, 30, 40, 50 kids because of one positive. And it's proven that is effective because we're not having 5, 6, 7, or 10 positives as a result of a positive that's found outside. And that's what public health says. It's relative to what you're doing with your protocols. So here we are. Hopefully we continue to trend all things in the right direction, but another positive start to the week.
That is good. Okay, does any board members have any questions? All right. We'll go on to report 6.02, annual certified enrollment report.
I'll turn this over to Dave and let him walk you through these slides. Is there something wrong with the screen today?
There's something wrong with that one. That one was
Oh,
fine.
here we go. See, looks like we're looking at something on an old overhead projector
Yeah,
from 1972.
It's turned pink on me, yeah. What I'm going to share tonight is much like the information that you've seen for the past several years with regard to trends in enrollment. It's a combination of a look at what our certified enrollment is this year and what that means for us. And then what do the trends look like for the last number of years with regard to enrollment? Okay? So this captures where we certified on October 1st. Actually, it was October 15th when it was certified, but we did our sampling on October 1st. There are a couple of these numbers that have already changed. Late this afternoon, we found one that will move from a tuitioned in to a resident student, for example. And through Friday, districts get a chance to clean up things. And so this one happened to be from Spencer Community Schools that found an error, and so that will be corrected. Overall, our resident enrollment is down a bit. As you can see, 17.2 FTEs from a resident enrollment perspective. That's the number of kids that we are serving that are residents of our district. That's that 2288.3. Our resident students attending in other places is up a little bit. That's a combination of open enrolled outs and tuition outs. Okay. The factors, the little bits and pieces of kids that are about them coming to us to take classes, for example, ISD students or Heartland Family or Heartland Christian students coming to us to do post-secondary enrollments, etc., is down a little bit. Line 7 there, the actual enrollment 7, reflects what our budget enrollment is. And you can see it's down 15.19. Technically, that will be 14.19 after today, assuming the D approves all the changes that we're proposing. A budget enrollment is the heart and soul of the funding for the district for the next year. Okay? That includes all the kids that we serve that are resident students and all the money that we send to other districts from our taxing authority as resident students. Okay? Non-resident public attending our school is down a little bit, 8.9, and that number will also shift. It'll be 9.9. because that's where that other student came from, for the, up at the top. Our preschooler numbers are down, and I've got a summary slide that will show you that in a little bit. But overall, the number of school-age FTEs that we serve in the district is down about 26 students. Okay, 26.69 students. Now, what this really means is, will come up a little later in what I'll show you. I've got some key points about what it all means and kind of explain to you where I think anyway they're coming from. The next series of slides we're going to go through quickly because it's not the numbers that are important, but the patterns that are important. This first one looks at that total school age enrollment number. And as you can see, there was a bubble about 2011-12 where we were up a little more than we are now. We've been almost 3,100 kids at one time. We're down to 29, 21 now. So you can see 15 years ago, we were smaller than we are. But 7, 8 years ago, we were larger than what we are now. Resident students has also fluctuated. It's been from a high of 2,500 to a low of about 2,200. And you see the pattern is up just a little bit there in the past several years. It's down a little bit this year, but it's been up a little bit. Our open enrollment contracting is kind of leveled out or is starting to go down just a little bit. Last 3 years have been very consistent. We were at a high of almost 691 at one point, and 15 years ago we were at 245. So our open enrollment open enrollment in numbers are still very healthy. When you look at open enrollment out, we have been open enrollment out has been more attractive for kids. And you can see the last 10 years or so, that number has been increasing. We hovered around 100 kids for a number of years there, and then since about the last 10 years, it's been going up. Okay? When you look at the effects of open enrollment, and both in and out, and contract in and out, we gain a number of students. And right now it's about 312 students. At one time we were up to 540 students, more in than out. Now we're at 312 students, more in than out. It still represents about 1 out of every 6 kids in the hall from another school. The additional weightings, we've had a couple of blips in the radar, but overall it's been very consistent. We gain about, between 38 and 42 FTEs that represent bits and pieces of kids for post-secondary enrollment options, for some preschool funding, for ELL meetings, and things like that. Other than those 2 years, though, it's been relatively consistent. From a budget enrollment perspective, it's not been real consistent. When you look at it in this kind of light, it's been as low as $24.75 and as high as $26.24 from a budget enrollment perspective. It's down a little bit this year from what it was last year, but still it's healthy in the overall run as far as the last 50 years are concerned. When you look at the amount of gain or loss on the budget enrollment side, this is resident students. As you can see, it's been a roller coaster. And I applied a multiple order trend line on that so you can really get a chance to see it. There's a lot of variance in the sample, so a multiple order regression made more sense. It's definitely a roller coaster, right? But the other way to look at this is we're within about 200 on the top side and the bottom side for as long as we can remember, as long as I have data. Last 20 years, we've not gone more than 100 up or more than 100 down. So overall, it's been relatively consistent. And when you look at the total enrollment net gain or loss, that's the number of students that we serve overall. We're down a little bit this year, but we are on an upward trend from the last 5 years or so. Okay? From a weekly enrollment perspective, again, this just looks at the last 13 or so years, every Wednesday's head count, which is a whole different number than what funding is concerned. But it gives you an idea of kind of where we've been. High of 3,200 or so, low about 2,900. When you think about where do kids go and where are they coming from an open enrollment and a tuition-based perspective, Council Bluffs, Trainer, and Glenwood are the three big hitters for us. Underwood probably fits in that picture somewhere too. The columns on the left represent this year, in, out, the net gain or loss to that district. And the delta is a number that compares, how does that compare to last year? So when you look at this, the way to look at that first line for Council Bluffs is we're sending about 15 more kids to Council Bluffs from a net gain or loss perspective this year than we did last year. The open enrollment ins have gone up for us a little bit, but the outs went up more considerably. Does that make sense? Okay. And so you can see that Council Bluffs and Trainer are our two largest ins. They're also our two largest outs. Trade a lot of kids between those two. One of the things that is an interesting thing that we worried about was the effect of CAM, Clayton Ridge, and now Council Bluffs fully online academy schools. And really, it hasn't affected us much at all. And in fact, CAM and Clayton Ridge, we actually have 4 fewer kids going out to those this year than we have had in the past years. So the overall difference is about 11.5 students from a net impact, fewer coming into the district than last year. So just some key points for you. We're down 15.19. Actually, that'll be 14.19 after today. Students served is down about 26. The beds enrollment looks at kids who are counted for the basic educational data survey that forms the basis for like athletic unions and those kinds of things. And it counts heads, not FTEs, and it counts some kids as whole kids, even though they're not coming to us for whole purposes. Like if they're coming to us to swim, just to swim from somewhere else, they're counted in this number. Right? Whereas if they're homeschooled, dual enrolled, just to do a PSEO class, they don't count. It's that kind of stuff. So beds enrollment's down 51 kids. Our net enrollment gain from open enrollment and tuition in is down 11.5 students. Now what I'm really saying though is going to be ameliorated a little bit by these last two statements. So where have the kids gone? Right? We had 28 students who were resident students last year who are choosing to fully homeschool competent private instruction this year and not engage with us at all. 28 students is more students than we lost from a resident enrollment perspective. If COVID hadn't happened, my guess is we would be up from a resident enrollment perspective instead of down. Those 28 kids profoundly impacted that 14.91 that were down. The other piece that has happened is that we have many fewer pre-K kids this year than we had last year. If you have a 3-year-old, you're much less likely to send them to school in a pandemic than you would be otherwise. And we're finding that's the case. We don't have as large of a waiting list, for example, for preschool. Our preschool numbers are really down. We also lost the Visions grant funding that paid for a lot of our preschool kids who were 3-year-old preschoolers. And so we've been focusing on 4-year-old preschoolers that get funding. So bottom line, if you look at the 25 fewer in pre-K and the 28 fewer from a resident enrollment perspective that are not homeschooling, that really explains the trends down this year. I fully expect as we go through the year, a lot of those kids are going to be coming back to us. We'll serve them, but we won't have funding for them. They're just a bump in the road as far as our county is concerned. Any questions?
So anyone who chose to homeschool their student this year, can they come back to school anytime?
Yes,
Anytime this year?
yes.
Okay.
Just a added point, thanks Dave, all that's really good and detailed information. Happen to know from being connected to a lot of superintendents that this is, it's a little bit of, it's a mystery, but it's not a mystery, but all school districts all over the state are dealing with a lot of significant decreases in enrollment, some of our neighbors as well. Just to give you an idea, Des Moines Public Schools were down 1,100 kids. You can only imagine. I know it's a big system, but that is a huge, huge hit to their budget. Some districts are trying to trace kids, because in our case, we've got a lot of it's the choice of homeschooling, not leaving our district, so to speak, but homeschooling within our district and not dual enroll. But other districts are finding their kids spread across the state. One of our local districts is finding that a lot of the kids are on the west side of the river. So it's something everybody's dealing with. I think when all smoke cleared, we actually felt rather good about this report than what we were worried about coming into it. So I appreciate Dave's one comment that, take away the COVID year, and while this wouldn't look significantly like more students coming in, but it would be trended the other direction, as it has been for the past handful of years, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about this in terms of budgets, budgets will be down next year. Depending on what the legislature does, that plays out. If our enrollment stayed perfectly the same, whatever the modified supplemental amount or new money would be, that would be our increase. Remember, when we have an enrollment increase, then that adds to our new money. When we have a decrease, it takes away from that in a very real way. So we can anticipate having a little tighter belt next year as a result of these 15 kids from a resident perspective, I guess.
Still a big question mark what the state will do with SSA this year. A pretty good bump last year, obviously pre-COVID. And so we'll have to see. But reserves are still very good with the state, so they still have some flexibility, and I don't think we expect to be, again, another knock on wood, we don't expect to be shortchanged public schools by a ton. But one thing I've learned in my career is you never know what a legislature is going to do, so it's just something to keep our eye on.
And we do have a 2-year contract, so we at least have some of those variables already accounted for.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thanks, Dave. Go on to discussion items, 7.01, 200 series policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the first read.
Yes, so just again, I know I'm redundant for the board, but for anybody that may be joining us, the board decided to do an IASB review in the fall. in August actually, turned to be very valuable, and there's a lot of good news in that there's not a lot of significant changes that are being proposed so far as we're marching through this. Actually, I've been through all of them, but as I'm bringing them forward to you, little chunks at a time, we're probably going to divide the 200 series into about 3 sections. So going forward, I'll try not to overlap any of the the 200s to the 300s, but within the 200s we'll bring the next set next time, while these are on second read. Really no language changes within these. In other words, as I've said to you up front, that at any point in time when I cross a policy that we've had significant input specific to LC, like we had in the 100 series, I transferred that over even if we were updating to an updated IASB policy. Nothing like that in this that we're bringing here. This is really just, as you see, anytime there's a quote-unquote delete, it's really not a delete. It's just switching over to the current IASB policy. In some cases, sometimes there are some things that are rescinded. Our 200 series will, when all said and done, will grow in number a little bit. There's a little more specificity in the numbers. We stop at, I think right now we have up to the 205 series. And the IASB, some of these that we're taking out, you'll notice that we already, while we took some out, it added some 206 numbers. So there will be a little more by the time we're said and done. But there's nothing language-wise that is changed in any of these other than just updating them to the current IASB. And something that's really going to be helpful going forward, as you know, is just the renumbering. Getting them in line with the IASB policy, so when we have reviews going forward. And I'll give you an example. We just came through, it's not included here yet. I believe that'll be on the next one, but 203.7, which is the one that we spend a considerable amount of time on. We'll bring all that language over. We won't change it. But instead of 203.7, it's going to be 203. So, there'll be a number alignment, but that language will keep that consistent because of the amount of time we spent on it. And that's really what we're doing. So, nothing outside of really just alignment and updating and merging with IASB.
I did run across a couple of things. It was a little bit more difficult to compare what we had before and and then aligning with IASB's recommendations. And so, for example, it talks about an organizational meeting of the board of directors. It's every 2 years, every odd year. And then it says the even years are annual. Is there a policy that's coming out that will describe the annual meeting then?
Yes, that's later in the 200 series.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And then that was one of them. And then another question I had is that a lot of these at the bottom, there's notes. Are those going to remain on the policy?
No. When you say notes,
Just like on organizational, the board of directors, and then it has the 3 paragraphs, and then note, Iowa law establishes the organizational meeting at or before the first, et cetera. Will that note, will those notes stay on our policy, or will they be removed?
I believe the notes do stay unless, yeah, I think there are some examples where they possibly wouldn't, where it wouldn't, it may, like in other words, if a note says another option would be, like in other words, if there's a note saying that they have an option 1 and 2 for a policy,
Right.
that wouldn't stay. But I think like those 2 examples would.
Right, because there was like a note on, when choosing the president, vice president, on our policy before, which we, we have been following the past, I think, couple of years, was vote by ballot. But that is not in the ISAB's template or recommendation. So do we decide, it does state that if you want to, if you go down to the one for president, if you want to vote in a different way, you can put it in your policy.
Yeah, if you wanted to make specific mention of that, we most definitely can.
And so I guess my question is that these are coming to us, they will remain, unless we question different things, this will be how our policy will be on the
Yes.
second reading and how we do.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess it would be up to the board members if we wanted to keep it in, vote for president by ballot, or if it's just going to be a motion and reading this, we don't even have to have a second. It's just nominating people for that position, and then it would be a voice vote.
It wouldn't have to be. You could still utilize ballots. The question would be, do you want that to be in a policy?
Okay,
But then in the policy, you want to practice with policy, so you would want to make sure that you did that way all
Correct.
the time. But that's easy enough to add if the board feels that still needs to be mentioned in policy.
well, truthfully, we never had it by ballot before until
Oh.
I think we read it, and it's kind of like, oh, well, we haven't been doing this, and we need to go by our policy. And so we started doing it. So what do board members feel? Is it something that we would need to go by ballot? Is it an issue with nominating someone, and I guess if someone wants to vote no, or, yeah, I mean, it's everyone's choice, but I just want to make sure we're clear on what we want to do per Lewis Central Board, and not just what ISAB recommends. Because if no one has an issue with voting by voice,
Well, Dr. Knost, you were saying if it's, you can still utilize it, it's just,
Yeah.
it's board preference, it's just not policy mandated, so we could still in that meeting request that?
Yes.
Okay.
okay, I guess I read that differently. I thought it said that we needed to put that. I have to get up to the,
Yeah, could you tell me exactly?
it was in the organizational meeting.
It's the one on the screen, I think, the president of the board is elected by.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the line.
Because if you're going
It's in the
to use it,
note.
you have to use that policy. Again, my preference would be not to have it in there, and if we choose to use a ballot, then we can use a ballot at that.
That's kind of my thought too.
Otherwise, we have to use a ballot, use a ballot in there.
Correct. And I understand it. I guess I just thought that that's what it said, that if another method for electing the board president is used, that method should be outlined in the policy as well.
Yeah, if it was put everybody's name in a hat, pull your name out of a hat, you're the president, then you'd have to outline that method, but, I mean, we pretty much used a nomination and an election process for all of our process. So if we choose to use a nomination, election, and a voting process, it can be a private vote or a verbal vote.
Okay?
I agree, just as they need to get a majority to say the process of reaching that majority, so.
I think it,
I think it's sufficiently vague.
if there's a point where we feel, okay, two people really want to do it, and we want to vote in a closed vote, or in a.
Then someone can
in a
bring it up
private
at
vote,
that
or
time.
Somebody could request that we do it in writing, it's still a vote,
Right, absolutely.
it's just not, it's not a different method.
I do
That's
see
why I
what
said
you're,
if you pull names out of a hat, it would be a different method, and I think we'd have to identify that one.
I agree.
Okay,
I do see what you're saying. It's page 97, that note, that if another method,
correct.
Mhm.
yeah.
So what's being recommended, so I can bring it back on the second read?
So I think it's recommended that we don't put anything specific, but when we go to vote, if someone feels, or we have two people nominated, I guess, if someone feels that they would like a ballot, then we can request a ballot. So, but not specifically put it in the policy.
So as is, as is presented. Okay.
And then along with this one too, is there a board policy coming out about a board evaluation? Is there one in there for board evaluation?
Yes. It's my other legal pad, so I'd have to get it.
Okay, and that's fine, it's just that in our policy before, it stated that the board president was supposed to, come up with the board evaluation annually. And so that's why, as long as we have another policy, I hate to strike that out if we don't have another policy coming up that would talk about the board evaluation. And then I also noticed that the board secretary treasurer, the board is supposed to evaluate. It says in the policy. So Andrea, did you know that?
Well-
By law, the board secretary and the treasurer, and the superintendent are the only three positions that the board can evaluate, doesn't mean that they have to.
Board
Okay.
usually defers that to the superintendent as far as the,
Okay, because that's how I read it in the policy, was that the board was supposed to, it is the responsibility of the board to evaluate the board secretary treasurer annually.
I can,
So we
Get a
can
legal-
assign you
Yes.
that responsibility. Okay, I just want to make sure we're following board.
technically in this situation as your employee, I'm required.
Right.
So the board knows that's happening, so the board is responsible.
Okay.
You would, if you allowed me to assist the superintendent and those things weren't getting done, that would be the responsibility of the board because you were allowing that to happen.
Right, right. And then also along with that, there's a blank at the last paragraph that says if the secretary treasurer is unable to fulfill the responsibilities set out by the board in the law, blank will assume those duties. So will you figure out someone to slip in that spot?
Put Anna's name there, she won't know.
Yeah, I think that, speaking of Anna, I think the reason blank was that you could go two ways with it. You could put a specific person, or you could imply that someone else will be
Right.
assigned accordingly.
Well, and that's what I didn't know if the verbiage should be that at that time someone else will be assigned, because Gabe has come in and he's, taken Andrea's place before, or was it Dale?
Yeah, it was
Someone's place
Dale and
before.
Dale.
Yeah. And so I just don't want to come back and read this on a second reading and then not have everything filled in or
So would the
changed.
preference be that I just put that in the verbiage instead of it being a blank implying that I put in the verbiage that someone will be assigned, or would the board prefer that we, I would avoid, it's always my practice and policy that you avoid a specific name.
Correct, but maybe the superintendent will decide on
Yep.
who would fulfill the duties if,
Yep.
then we can put it on you to make that decision.
Sure. Absolutely.
So put superintendent in that blank.
Yeah.
It's not on my agenda.
I'm sure it was Mark last year that made the decision that Gabe would.
Correct, and I believe, so we have never, it has never come to us and said, hey, so-and-so's gone, you guys decide who you want to sit there. And that has
Yeah.
never occurred. And it could be also, this is more meaning someone in a long-term position, not just one night.
Right.
You
But
also
I-
have to realize these policies are written for a school district of our size and a school district that could be, 1/10 of our size.
Right,
So that's why it says it could be somebody from the public. So they're not an employee of the school district. So the superintendent would evaluate that person because they have no authority over that person. Now it becomes the board's responsibility to evaluate that person because they are the ones that are actually supervising or directing that person to do the task.
right.
All right. Easy enough.
Did anyone else see anything any comments or anything on these? Everyone okay with them on the first reading?
Yes.
And then if you see anything before the next meeting, because we'll bring that second reading, then we can chat about it then.
Absolutely. And as we're going through these, in these chunks, I'm trying to put them in chunks that make sense, In other words, find a stopping point that makes sense for Anna, and also a stopping point that doesn't, at some point in time, when you're looking at numbering, renumbering, and replacing, you can cross over into, well, if you address these, you've got to go on to the next numbers because they connect. So we're trying to find places and try to keep it at smaller increments. But if there are, I would ask if in your review of these coming up to meetings, whether it's a first read or the second read, if there are significant questions about anything, give me a heads up so I can do the full legal research and make sure that I've got good answers for you. Not little things. I mean, if you see something significant that would maybe require a little more looking into from me, that would be helpful.
Okay. Everyone good with these on first reading?
Yes.
All right. And we'll go back to the agenda. Comments and suggestions from the audience. Has anyone made any comments online?
Nope.
All right. We'll go on to action items. 9.01, 200 series policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the first read.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the policies included in this discussion and all accompanying regulation exhibits that we read on first reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Huston.
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Ryland.
Yes.
Ms. Atkins.
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes. Our next board meeting will be November 2nd.
I will not be here.
You won't be here?
absent.
Is there anything else coming up between now and then?
What are thoughts on the IASB?
Oh, IASB, are they,
Joel?
how are we doing? Are they doing that all virtual? Are they doing any type of,
All virtual.
It's all virtual.
Everything's virtual.
okay,
And we did for the delegate assembly. We
right.
Registered you. And, Bob, you're already,
Yes, I'm already taking care of it.
you're already taken care of because your role with IASB.
Right,
so.
right.
So yeah, Anna can register anybody that's interested in doing the virtual conference.
Okay,
It's an adjustment, there was some camaraderie with traditional conferences, but I also am noticing that there's a convenience factor to virtual conferences that, we didn't have before. You don't have to give up a full couple of days.
right.
You can register, and if there are 3 or 4 things that you really want to schedule and log into, you can, and work around other things in your schedule. So, but that's entirely up to each individual board member. Just let Anna know or communicate it to me.
I did notice too, it looks like it's the Wednesday evening and Thursday till about 2 instead of all day Thursday. just a little
Yeah, I
bit
didn't
shift
notice
in the
that.
schedule. So. Okay.
Okay, well, you can go ahead and put me down for, and let Anna know to register. If anyone else knows.
Does anybody know right now that they would like to be registered?
I was thinking about it, especially that time Wednesday and Thursday afternoon works perfect for me.
So you want me to go
I
ahead
would
and,
just like to because
yeah.
I'm new and
Right.
Amy, did you say yes?
And yes for me.
Jen?
Yep.
All right, so Doreen, Travis, Anna, Jen. If anybody else decides, just let us know.
Okay.
You
And then,
know, everything will be recorded, so if you're registered, you want to.
That's the other thing.
Concurrent sessions, you can,
Oh, good
you can pick
call.
up the other one at a.
I-
different time.
Yeah, I had,
there's two conferences that are usually going on at the same
Yeah.
time.
no, it's a great benefit. Our conference from the end of July, that the administrators usually attend, I think it was a return to learn stuff, but I was just slammed that week. And what Travis just mentioned came in really handy because a colleague said to me, hey, did you check out that keynote on Wednesday or whatever it was? And I said, I'm so frustrated. I said, I just couldn't get on. And then it hit both of us. It's recorded.
yeah.
And I went back and was able to watch the keynote. And I ended up using chunks of that keynote in my opening, like my Zoom gathering for the whole staff here. So that's the other thing that's a benefit. I don't think it'll ever replace the camaraderie
Yeah.
of getting together. I like that atmosphere. I enjoyed those of us that got to go last year to IASB. That will resume, but just this year we have to be different. So.
Right, absolutely. So, anything else? All right, can I go ahead and get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Gonna stay?